Hi.
Hi, and welcome back to Dog Speak podcast with Patricia McGrady and Colin Spanks. And today we have Jessica Hyams. And Jessica's going to be discussing with us all about bull breeds. So Jessica's going to talk to us today about bull breeds. Jessica has a fantastic background. So what I'm going to do is let Jessica introduce herself. Over to you, Jessica.
Hello, I'm Jess or Jessica, whatever you want to call me. Yeah, so my background is quite varied, but varied within the dog world. So, as a young child, my mum actually volunteered at Battersea, so I spent a lot of time in the Battersea kennels from sort of age 3. We always had rescue dogs. She had one from before I was born, and then when she passed away a couple of years later, my mum decided to adopt a very bitey King Charles Cavalier, who bit everyone except for me actually growing up, which I always thought was interesting. Um, and at about, I always had a passion for dogs, really wanted to be a rescue worker or a vet, was obsessed with Animal Hospital and all of those shows, those 90s animal shows. And at 18, we had before that, we had lots of different rescue dogs growing up. And at 17, 18, found myself in a relationship with a bit of a nasty older guy who had a couple of, well, he had a Staffy cross, and then he acquired a sort of Staffy cross, American Bulldog cross. Rottweiler puppy, who was being passed between a few people. He was quite physically abusive to both of these dogs. And with the puppy, in the end, I ended up leaving him and leaving with the puppy, who at this point was 6 months old. So um, he was in and out of the RSPCA vet because he was having bouts of quite severe GI issues. He had suspected parvo at the beginning because he hadn't actually been vaccinated and was having a lot of those symptoms. So we were in and out on and off. And it got to a point where we had three rescue dogs at home, and my mum really wanted to make sure that he could get home through a rescue. But when we spoke to the RSPCA vets, they said they're putting down one Staffy type dog every hour. And in fact, you can't get them into rescues at all. And this was in 2010, 2011. Um, by this point, about 2010, sorry, maybe 2009, somewhere between there. And So it kind of opened up this can of worms where I found out that all these dogs, these Staffy type dogs, were being put to sleep. Um, and because there was just such a huge amount of them. And then I started an animal management diploma at Meristwood, Animal Sciences. And Yeah, I really kind of thrived there. I didn't do very well at school for various reasons. Anyway, so this dog, my mum managed to eventually get him into Dogs Trust, and he got rehomed through Dogs Trust. And I kind of went on a sort of vendetta against everyone who was abusing these breeds at that point, and I just started taking in dogs. To my mother's dismay, was turning up with kind of Staffy Cross puppies all the time and adult dogs. I left a house party with a year-old dog at 2 in the morning at one point. Went to another party where a dog had escaped from a traveller site next door. Again, came home with an adult dog at sort of 3 in the morning. And it was just constant. And that carried on when I moved out as well. And I started at about the age 20, I started my own dog walking business alongside. So I often had, small groups of dogs, between 4 and 6 dogs, and a couple of rescue staffies thrown in there. Um, at around 21, I adopted Lulu. I was volunteering for a rescue, and I had her for 10 years. But at 26, I decided to go back to school. And originally, my plan was to become a vet. I soon realised that actually, on my Access to Biomedicine course, I realized that I can't really go anywhere near any dead animals. Like even a dead spider, I couldn't even pick up a dead spider. It's just, I've got a problem with it. And my dad said, well, how are you going to be a vet then? Because that is a large part of the job. So, um, at this point, I'd been shadowing a lady called Donna Lincoln, who's the behaviourist for New Hope Animal Rescue, which is a non-destruct rescue. And at this point, I'd been working in non-destruct rescue for about 6 years, 6, 7 years. And I've been shadowing her for a year or so. And I actually decided to just further my career in terms of behaviour, found the role of clinical animal behaviourist, and decided to do a degree, which was fantastic, at Roehampton, where I selected my own modules. I did a degree in biological sciences, which basically was split between biomedicine. So I did molecular biology, neuroscience, immunology modules, etc. But I also did lots of conservation ecology and animal behavior modules as well, evolutionary biology and all different things, which really set me up nicely actually for clinical behavioral medicine. And then my thesis I based on, well, it was meant to be comparing activities like tug, ball games, high arousal activities, and comparing salivary cortisol with slow sniffing activities and seeing how long cortisol lasted and how these behaviors showed up and things like that. However, this was in this was March 2020 during lockdown, and they closed the labs at my school, at my university, so we couldn't actually submit any of the samples. So in the end, what we ended up doing is my supervisor and I rejigged some data from another similar study. And actually what I found in that study was when the pit bull was compared with 4 other breeds, if the dogs had no exercise for 2 weeks, compared with 2 weeks of just playing 20-minute of ball games as their only outdoor enrichment, that actually the 4 other breeds aside from pit bull, their cortisol levels went down. However, the pit bulls went up, which I thought was really interesting, by a small percent, but it was different from all the other breeds. And essentially what I wanted to look at there was stress response in pit bull type dogs, bull breed, bull terrier type dogs, which obviously I'll go into in a bit. But that's really my background. After that, just carried on taking on behavior cases for rescues, rehabbing dogs, that kind of thing. And then I got certified with the ICB, International Canine Behaviorists. I have been approved certification as a clinical animal behaviorist with the APBC, and that was in 2022. I'm still trying to finish my paperwork to submit. But I do sort of practice as a cab, and I'm part of supervision groups. I work with a vet behaviorist as well. But yeah, that's my background. Technically, I'm not yet a cab, but watch that space. I am hoping to finish my paperwork and submit it by the end of the year.
Wow, that's a hell of a background. Yeah, well done you. Yeah, and then moving forward to the CAB. So that's all pretty good stuff, Jessica. That was really really good. Um, Today you're basically here to talk about all breeds, and I think it'd be nice if we can kick off with the XL bullies and the ban that happened, a little while ago. And if I remember rightly, I think the end of last month, December, was the last time for dogs to be neutered. I
Mhm.
think, yeah, of a certain Brits, a certain age. What was your whole take on the whole fiasco that sort of opened up in front of us?
Yeah, I mean, I've the XL bully ban massively affected me on a personal level in several ways. I have a dog who is classed as an XL bully. That's my dog Piglet. She's not quite as big. I know. Well, she probably is part of it as well. But there you go. We won't tell anyone that. Her name's Piglet. Sorry. She technically, so the XL bullies, if you're looking at what they technically look like, they're normally around 50, 60 kilos, the actual XL American bullies. or American Bully XL. Piglet is actually 35 kilos. She's technically a classic or standard bully. So she's, if you're going by the sort of vague breed standard that's out there, she's technically not an XL bully, but she does measure up as an XL bully in under the government guidelines. So I have my personal experience with that. Secondly, I have the rescue experience, which was pretty traumatic because so many were killed. There were so many spaces, and homes really, really rushed throughout lockdown. Which was sorry, not throughout lockdown, throughout the ban and post ban, which has been really tricky. And then the sort of next part has been, clients that have come to me and supporting caregivers with dogs who are now muzzled and on lead, who potentially had freedom, a lot more freedom before. And so yeah, it's kind of three parts for me. On a personal level, it definitely really dampened my mental health. My dog, after I rehabbed her and we did a lot of work together, she led a very free life. I took her to a country park every day, which luckily I could drive 10 minutes to even though I was in London. She would swim, she would pull logs out of the water, she would run around with other dogs. And yeah, she was really at a point where she lived very freely, which was really nice for her. And that was a big part of her rehabilitation as well. And now she's on lead and muzzle as quite a low energy dog. It's not massively impactful in terms of energy levels, but she's quite a frustrated full-on greeter and potentially a dog that lacked in the ability to develop nice natural social skills with dogs as a puppy. So it's something we had to work on, and part of that was giving her a lot more agency and autonomy, and matching her with the right dogs, that kind of thing. Because my background is also quite heavily ethology based, I don't practice a lot of structured obedience training in my rehab. I use it where necessary, but in terms of that kind of side of things, you won't hear me talk about it that much because I find it's a very small portion of what the dogs I work with need, whatever the breed. I'm taking more complex cases and things. But yeah, so that's a really been a struggle because now I have this dog who doesn't really understand why, she's on lead and muzzle, and we do as much as we can to keep her feeling happy and content. But I also have the double whammy of, if another dog runs over and she greets them in a frustrated way or makes her silly noises that she does, where I would say she sounds a bit like a pig dragon. So it's a cross between a snort and a roar in dogs' faces, which sometimes they don't take too kindly to. But if the owner is to then, want to get shirty about that to me, then it puts my dog at risk. So there's massive amounts of anxiety walking her on lead and muzzle, for both of us really, and how public perceptions play out. So there's that, and actually to help with that, I've now started fostering a puppy. So she's now getting a lot of that social contact, which she's really enjoying, and he also likes to shout in dogs' faces, so they are a perfect match because they have a lot of fun together. He's a miniature dachshund. So yeah, there's that portion which has been very, very tricky for me to navigate, and I'm human, and as a caregiver, it's been something that's been really hard. The rescue scene was horrific and still is pretty horrific, but the rush to get dogs into homes before the ban was massively problematic for several reasons. We saw a rise in what we've kind of labelled in the industry as pop-up rescues, which were people who I suppose wanted to take things into their own hands and set up rescues not knowing anything about training and behaviour. Unfortunately, with the XL bullies, and I blame social media a lot for this, but it's become normalized for people to use tools like prong collars, e-collars, grots. So a lot of these pop-up rescues that started trying to save these dogs were also using aversive training methods as well, and rehoming dogs on aversive tools, which is still kind of happening a little bit. So there was that complication, but also there was rushed homing of very strong, often traumatized dogs into novice homes with young children and all sorts of things. And we saw a massive amount of really dangerous issues occur, sadly, from dogs that maybe if they had gone into the right hands, had the right rehabilitation, probably would have been fine. But they weren't. And it was all people trying to do their best and trying to jump in, but it caused a great deal of other issues. And then we had the rescues, the good rescues that are out there with experienced people working there, like New Hope Animal Rescue, for instance, who were just inundated with bullies because there was a massive surge even a year before the ban came in. Everywhere was full of bullies, and then they banned them. So then it was like, well, what do we do? Do we kennel these dogs for life? And a lot of them don't kennel well because they've got thin coats. A lot of them have musculoskeletal issues. They're quite soft and sensitive, actually. A lot of bull breeds are, but specifically the American bullies, for reasons I'll go into in a bit. But yeah, there was that issue of, okay, well, now what do we do? Because now they really can't be homed. So yeah, and it also had a big ripple effect in obviously other types of bull breeds. So I ended up 2 weeks before, well, 3 weeks before I was meant to be evicted from my home at the end of the year, 2023, I ended up having to take in a large bull breed who was displaying quite dangerous behaviours, who'd been passed around, just to hold a space for him because there weren't any spaces, and actually he wasn't an American Bully XL, and his behaviors were rehabable, but there was just no spaces. And this was, I mean, it was constant. I was getting calls from 6 a.m. till midnight trying to get people trying to rehome dogs. And bear in mind, I'm not a rescue. I'm a behaviorist that helps in rescue. So yeah, there was a lot of really difficult things. And then a lot of people panicking about whether their dog fit the bill. And there was this kind of, a lot of behaviorists or people working in rescue were saying, if your dog doesn't exactly fit the description, don't get them registered. But then you have this thing being held over your head of your dog being seized, your dog being knocked down, or your dog being shot dead on the street or seized out in public at any point if a policeman was to take their behavior the wrong way. So it was a lot of, everyone needed a lot of mental health support. I know I went back into therapy, interestingly, CBT for trauma specifically, and actually my therapist at the time said that she had multiple other clients that had been referred to her who also had XL bullies. So just to paint a picture of the actual ripple effect that it had on mental health was a big thing. Saying that, there was a lot of positives in terms of, I had these lovely little online groups from people all over the country, and we do muzzle training together, and it made some nice communities within kind of people, I suppose, that were all trauma bonded together. But yeah, that, I suppose that was the positive. There were some community aspects which arose from it, but it was a very, very difficult time, and we're still seeing the repercussions now. We're getting a flood of cane corsos or cane corsos in rescue, most of which are being killed because there aren't any spaces, but we're seeing a huge amount coming into kennels all over the country. So if anyone's thinking of adopting a dog, please consider a cane corso. They're very low energy if managed correctly. But yeah, so I mean, that's, there's a lot of issues with the XL bullies. The other thing I suppose I'll touch on before I stop talking is the flood on social media of inappropriate training, which unfortunately started in 2020. And it's very accessible. social media training. So people that maybe wouldn't naturally opt into having their dogs trained or couldn't afford training, we're looking at pages like Southend Dog Training, Daniel Wells, is it, in Liverpool, who are all pushing for aversive methods. A lot of them would be showing these methods because it's an unregulated industry, right? On social media, using XL bullies because they were the epitome of like a big, strong dog, beast, wild beast that needs to be controlled. So unfortunately, even now, had a call this week with someone who had rescued a bully, and they had a prong collar on the dog. Very, very nice couple. And I said, I just saw it in the glimpse of a video that they'd sent me, and I said, oh, what's that metal thing? And they said, oh, it's this collar that stops him pulling, that a trainer told us about. And obviously I had to intervene there, but it's the tools have been so normalized, in terms of using them on these breeds because of social media pages that have 5-10 million followers, thousands of followers. Grots as well, French collars, the thin wires that go around their necks, and also e-collars. This was all being seen on social media. So people that weren't even into training just thought that it was normal to get an XL bully and stick a prong collar on them. Well, I say were, it's still happening now. And I see it a lot in London. So yeah.
I'm sort of lost for words because I knew what happened. I know what has happened, but actually speaking to someone and hearing it from you, how it impacted on your life personally as well, really does hit home. And that there are thousands of people who felt like you did, thousands. Um, is there anyone to blame as to why it came to what it came to?
I think there's lots of people to blame, in my opinion. You could say lots of people or no one, whichever way you look at it. Maybe I'm slightly more pessimistic. I think, the government needs to be regulating trainers and behaviourists and breeders. Um, there's that portion, and things need to be regulated that are potentially dangerous and shown on social media, because we know that aversive tactics cause pain, and pain causes things like aggression, right? So but also we've got the socio-emotional side of it. There's so much in that goes into training and behavior and understanding behavior and ownership and breeding that feeds into the issue, which has caused these, them to kind of add the XL bully to the Dangerous Dogs Act, to Section 1. So we've got the government. I personally feel also that there needs to be better recognition of pain in dogs by vets. I think as behaviorists, we see that a lot, where vets miss pain in dogs, and often it can be led to, it can lead to really, really dangerous situations. And if you speak about it, it can be perceived as vet bashing, which I think is a problematic term in itself, because I think if behaviorists go wrong, or a plumber goes wrong, we don't call it behaviorist bashing or plumber bashing. So I think we should all be holding each industry that is involved in dogs, because there is such a massive safety aspect, accountable. I think also just general knowledge about dogs, and also somewhat, I'm not going to go too much into this because it's such a complex area, but like this fixation on breeds and breed standards, and without also understanding just like basic ethology and neuroscience, development, attachment, all of these little things that really you need to understand canine behavior. A lack of education is a huge problem. I think it mainly comes back to the government. I mean, they rush through this this paperwork essentially, which we know doesn't work. Like, we know it doesn't work. However, what were they, there's also, you could say, what were they meant to do? But it would have been a good time to obviously revamp the Dangerous Dogs Act, because we've seen in other countries where it can be beneficial. And actually, if you look back at the origin of Section 1, Dangerous Dogs Act 1991, and specifically Section 1, the problem dog at the time was actually the Rottweiler. But there was a Conservative MP who had a Rottweiler, and he brought this Rottweiler into Parliament and said, look, my dog's really soft. We don't want to ban the Rottweiler. But the head of the RSPCA at the time, or the head of I think, who dealt with dangerous dogs, he was an American ex-military bloke, can't remember his name. But he'd come over from the States, and the pit bull was viewed as the kind of more aggressive dog. But actually, a lot of people didn't even know what the pit bull was in this country. There had been 0 deaths or fatalities or major injuries caused by pit bulls at the time. However, they decided to focus in on the pit bull terrier, just due to this man's thoughts about really the socio-economic background of the pit bull terrier in the States and who owned those dogs in the States. So it's massively based off bigotry, classism in itself, and he massively influenced Section 1 of the Dangerous Dogs Act. So government is what it obviously always comes down to. And I think also we've got to appreciate that the vets who are, and DEFRA, and the people working in these industries who are influencing this kind of legislation actually have never met an XL bully, let alone live with one. So, and these types of dogs. So yeah, I suppose if you have to point the finger at one person or one group of people, it would be the government.
I hear you loud and clear. But like you said, what were they to do? It was rushed. It was quick. And there are lots of things going on, incidents, some horrific incidents going on. For me, it's a bit of everything. The irresponsible dog owners, not understanding the breed, breeding, lots and lots of things put together as to why we're talking about it now. But something you said about training, yeah? Now, a lot of the XL bullies that I've been working with since the ban have basically come to me in the sense that they were given all this advice that you've just mentioned before by other trainers and the equipment they should use around their necks, etc., etc. And a few of them had gone into sports. Okay, now you know where I'm going with this one, Jessica.
I do. Oh, my favorite subject.
And I'm going to ask you: is bite work something that you would suggest that people do with their XL bullies?
Right, how long we got?
You crack on.
Okay. Right. Now, if you're going to go into a bite work, you want a dog that, if I say, and arguably, does any dog need bite work? I don't know. I'm not someone that keeps Malinois, so I'm not going to get into that. But if I was to practice bite work, I would want a dog that has good bite inhibition, that has capabilities to their arousal to switch on and off, come up and come down swiftly. That is bred in a way that they respond well to lots of obedience training and need to be worked. And certain patterns, certain points of the predatory motor pattern have been selected and things like that. I think there's a lot that goes into bite work. However, there is a trainer, Cab actually, who I've been speaking to a lot about bite work and things, and she has bull breeds and she does practice bite work with some of her bull breeds. Leonie McLeod, if anyone doesn't know her, check her out. But she said something really interesting to me the other day. She said, I think bite work is taken too seriously, actually. And actually, my dream is to get, this is what she said to me, is to get a standard poodle and train them to do bite work. And I said, maybe I'll put my Daxi on bite work. But she said, actually, no dog needs bite work, but it can
Yeah.
be fun, right? Um, so it depends whether you opt into it or not. Now, there's a lot of complexities with bull breeds and their breeding, but essentially, if we're looking back at the bull terrier, and I'm not going to go for kind of bulldogs on their own before that, and herding cattle and things, I'm going to jump straight to the part in history where we get into bull terriers, pit bull terriers, Staffordshire bull terriers, and this is where things get a bit blurry with people because there is the reason why people are spreading the idea that bull breeds need bite work is because they're looking at their breeding very literally. Well, they were bred for dog fighting. They were bred for bull baiting. So we need to meet that need with a healthy outlet. However, let's break that down. So what they were bred for originally was bull baiting, and that equated to an enclosed area with a bull inside that area, most of the time having had pepper shot up their nose, blown up their nose. So the bull is bucking and going wild, and then the bull terrier put in that pit and having to fight for their life and subdue or kill the bull, mainly subdue the bull. So what that often looked like was the dog having to jump up and latch onto the bull's face. Okay, that's the origin of that behavior. Now, in that kind of pit area, I would deduce that actually that dog wasn't excited to be there. I would deduce that probably that's quite traumatic, and that is more of a trauma response. That is a reaction to, that's a form of fighting for your life. That's what I would deduce from that. I don't think a lot of dogs would have gone in there being like, oh yeah, can't wait. And also, I think in terms of pit bull, about when I first got into pit bulls, I remember watching this video, and it was just on YouTube, and they quoted something really, really interesting, which I found with all the bull breeds, the bull terrier types that I've worked with, and it is that the pit bull terrier is the best at whatever you want them to be. So they're very versatile dogs, the actual pit bull terriers and the staffy. You can do lots of sports with them. You can do lots of training with them, but equally they love being a sofa dog that does now applauds in a country park. They are so in tune and attached to humans and wanting to please. They will be the best at whatever you make them, purely out of love and loyalty. And actually, there's a great book, if anyone wants to read it, which is called Pitbull: The Battle of over an American Icon. And she goes into a lot about, the history and genetics and development of this breed, but there's also a lot of memoirs and things that you can read online if you're that way inclined. But actually, if you break down the history, there were so many things like when the dogs were in the ring, they had to be able to be handled by the humans. So any dogs that showed aggression towards humans were shot in the head. They weren't bred from, they were culled because they had to be able to be handled. It's also so nuanced because they wanted them to react to dogs in the pit, but hey, they didn't want them reacting to dogs at home. So in terms of them just being prone, even if we had purebred pit bulls, which are few and far between, very, very rare, even if we had those, it doesn't necessarily demonstrate that this dog is going to innately be dog aggressive and needs to have their needs met in terms of replicating any bite work, dog fighting, spring poles. There's lots of old pit bull games that people are now brought back and started using in training and rehab, and on the positive reinforcement side as well. These dogs don't need bite work. Like I will say that until the cows come home. They don't need bite work. If you're a trainer and you have an interest in dog sports and you're very well bonded to your dog has, I'm going to go as far as to say, has been on a CT scanner to show that they have no musculoskeletal injury, they don't have any GI issues, and their body is 100% healthy, then go wild with your bite work. I don't care. Not into it personally. If you want to do it, that's fine. But what I will say is, what gameness is a dog bred to get very stressed very quickly, and also to get more hyper aroused the more in pain they are. So there's a quote from an old dog memoir: a gameness is a dog who was bred to fight through death. Yeah. If you look at old memoirs as well, you know, in the pits, dogs would often fight through legs hanging off, broken legs, all sorts of horrific injuries. So now these dogs have been massively diluted and mixed, and we've got a lot of guardian breeds now being bred into them, and that's what's happened with the XL bullies. But if we think about actually what these dogs were bred for, they were bred to get very stressed very quickly and stay there. So in terms of stress as an umbrella term, that's the way I like to describe it to my clients. You know, the emotional state can be different, right? We can have rage, we can have excitement, we can have lust, and thinking about our seeking systems and all different things. However, if we're looking at it like that, what does that mean? It means you can have a dog that can get very excited, but then that can turn very quickly into aggression, these kind of things. So I would also argue that, you know, there's a lot of trainers out there that think that bite work and bite sports helps to train bull breeds' arousal systems to bring them up and then bring them down. In my experience, 15 years experience of rehabbing these dogs, I personally don't see it like that. I like to generally keep them calm. Any play I ideally like between themselves. If not, we'll do chase, we'll do parkour, we'll do all sorts of activities like that, full body activities. But I've never seen the benefit in doing lots of tug games, lots practicing bite work, anything like that in dogs that I'm rehabbing in particular. And unfortunately, this rhetoric of you know, these dogs need to bite is causing so much more damage. And the thing is, I'm seeing these dogs after trainers have gone in and gone, oh yeah, don't worry about anything, but these dogs need to bite, they need to play tug. Okay, but what do you do when that dog's got lumbosacral injuries or chronic GI issues or a luxating patella, and actually they're bred to get more stressed when they're in pain, and a lot of the time more grabby? What does that do? It habituates the behavior, but also it doesn't question the underlying issue. I always use Piglet in this example, but I've got quite a lot of them. So Piglet came to me and she was quite different from the other bull terriers that I had because she was more an American bully, right? So she has some guardian breed in her. So she also had quite a big guarding problem, but she had this massive, she was masses of energy. She was like what you'd call the epitome of like a game dog. With other dogs, she would very full on want to play, you know, very antagonistic for maybe, I mean, she would go for like 2-3 hours. She had this frantic grabbing problem where she would jump up and lock onto your arms, fabric, you know, massive amounts of displacement behavior. But it was so frantic, really, really frantic and really dangerous, actually. Now, it was, I can't remember which year it was of the dog behavior conference, but Sarah Fisher talked about Henry and his grabbing issue and how many musculoskeletal and GI issues that she found. And after those were sorted, guess what? He wasn't grabbing anymore. And I've been thinking about this with Piglet. You know, is it down to pain? Is there something else going on? Because we've been looking at GI stuff. Her tummy wasn't great. And lo and behold, fast forward, get her on a CT scanner. She had chronic gut inflammation, pancreatitis, and she had multiple slip discs in her back. Multiple. She also has compression around the base of her tail, her vertebrae around the base of her tail. And she had some liver damage as well. Now, we didn't do much training around the grabbing. But once the chronic gut inflammation and the pancreatitis was sorted, I think it diminished about 80%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then it kind of isolated to just an extra person when they would come in the house, if there were multiple people in the room or anything like that. But we did do some training on it, and she had access to things that she could rip up that were hers to rip up, and that would meet that need quite a lot. But the thing that really caused that behavior to go extinct was actually when she went on pain medication and started to have laser therapy for her spine. But if you saw videos, I mean, feel free to go onto my Instagram after this and look at some old videos of Piglet where she's running and, dragging huge tree logs outside of pond, out of ponds and things like that. You would never think that this dog had any musculoskeletal issues. And when I look at videos of dogs on spring poles and, hanging off ropes, screaming, I see so many dogs that have the same configuration as her, or other dogs that I have seen that have been proven to have musculoskeletal issues. And all that need is being, all they're doing is meeting that need. And masking the issue. And I also find what's really interesting is, obviously with my own dog, I watch her very closely. And when I have, you know, played lots of tug games and things, and I've been toying around with things since the ban to see how I can make her life a little bit more exciting. If I play 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes max of tug with her, I will see that hyperarousal for the next 2 days, and I will see it in ripping up things. I will see it in all sorts of things, and it's also really interesting because I think we put a lot of emphasis on human animal bonds in terms of getting them to play with us and getting, how we meet that need and playing, oh, they need tug and this, that, and the other. But actually, when I play tug with her, or I, go through training or, play games with her, it's so different and does not match her playing with another dog, even though the dog that I have downstairs is the size of her nose. When they play and they're tugging onto things, it's not the same intensity. It's just something that can't be beaten. And obviously you have dogs out there that don't want to be around other dogs, and we've got to meet that need. And I've got some posts and things where I list a whole bunch of activities that you can do with your dog. There's scent work, there's parkour, there's just chasing them around and pretending you want whatever they've got in their mouth is a really fun game. But yeah, I think the bottom line is, with a lot of these breeds, people forget with bull breeds that they are just actually dogs. And it doesn't matter, how much gameness they perceive to have. It's just stress, because they're bred to get stressed, quickly. And if you want to argue that pit bulls need a different kind of enrichment, that's fine, but it's not the Victorian times. And how often do you see a purebred pit bull these days? And I have had a couple. I've had one that was a bait dog. I've had one that actually had killed two other dogs before she came to me, and the only dog I've really had that came from a strong line of fighting background. But she was muzzled a lot, but she would still sleep. She still wanted to sleep curled up with my other Staffy Cross in a crate. She still wanted to engage with other dogs. She was unpredictable with people outside of the household, which is with dogs outside of the household. And the rescue who she was under at the time did get me to euthanize her. This was in 2011. But I had her for 3 months, and she still took refuge in spending time with other dogs that were inside her home, and where she'd been introduced and was comfortable. And this was a dog that I didn't find out actually what she'd done to other dogs until after she was euthanized. A neighbor from the lady who took her, a neighbor of the lady who owned her before, called me and told me all of these things. But looking back at it, I mean, it was remarkable, really, because yeah, I mean, that should tell us a lot. At the end of the day, they're still social mammals.
And Jessica, can you tell us a bit about, you mentioned the musculoskeletal problems and some of the, predisposed genetic problems the bullies might have, and also about getting a diagnosis and, what's the best route to get things checked out? Because that can be a little bit tricky, can't it?
Yeah, it can be really tricky. And to be honest, there is no necessary route, sure way to get a diagnosis unless you push for a CT scan or an MRI. In terms of the XL bullies, I haven't met one yet that doesn't have luxating patella, elbow dysplasia, hip dysplasia, or anything like that. The way they have been bred is their configuration is so wrong. And again, it's getting normalized, like the Daxi, like the French Bulldog. But you know, these dogs have all got some GI issues or musculoskeletal discomfort, I would argue. And like I said, I haven't met one yet that doesn't. Now, how this often manifests is through hyperarousal, I find, in all bull breeds. Not just bull breeds, actually. I've got a couple of Romy dogs and all sorts of breeds that I work with that are also displaying more hyperaroused behaviors, such as, you know, aggression or, you know, heavy mouthing, jumping up, separation anxiety. But I think in terms of bull breeds, it's generally not shut down behaviors you see. It's normally excessive play that can turn into an argument. It's generally jumping up and grabbing. And if we look at the origin of that behavior, it makes perfect sense that a bull breed in pain or discomfort or emotional discomfort, you know, that's being overhandled or anything like that, is going to jump up and grab things when they get stressed. Equally, I don't think that needs to be met through bite work. I think that's just masking the issue, and I also don't think that it's making them more comfortable. So if we look at the American Bully as well, where they've been bred with more Mastiff types, they're quite far from a working breed. My dog, like I said, although she can be 0 to 100, she's pretty low energy. You know, I walk her 40 minutes a day. She has a little play in the afternoon, you know, early evening. She wakes up about 5-6 o'clock. And she'll play for about half an hour with the puppy, and then she's back to bed. She's not that old, she's 5. And the musculoskeletal issues can look like excessive play. They can look like wanting to jump up and rag things for 3 hours a day. They can look like being really, really full on and high energy. But if there's a dog that comes to me like that, a bull breed in particular, then pain is the first thing I look at. We've also got to look at the culture in terms of musculoskeletal pain and also gastrointestinal pain. It's very common for people to be, as I said, I'd say 90% of the dogs that I get that are bull breeds are now on prong collars or e-collars, which cause pain and probably further exacerbate any issues. And perhaps the reason that they got those collars in the first place might have been due to some hyper-aroused behaviors that are caused by pain and are now being treated with pain. But the other bit of the culture, which I think is massively problematic, is this push towards, one raw bowl of kind of raw red meat a day seems to be a real theme. And I'm not bashing raw. Some dogs do really good on raw, some dogs don't. But a lot of the bullies that I meet in French Bulldogs, they have very, very delicate digestive systems and, you know, need roughage and things. And so a bowl of raw red meat once a day, A, is going to leave them hungry and therefore stressed. But B, may not agree with that dog. Equally, you know, I've got a miniature Daxi that I work with, and that dog lives off a whole raw pheasant, I think a week, or I don't know how often, every few days, that the owner shoots on their land, and they add a bit of veg here and there, and that dog's doing really well. So it does depend on the dog. However, this mass advice that these dogs are sort of apex predators that need big bowls of raw meat once a day so that you can engage them through training the rest of the time, and you know, that they don't need any fruit or veg because they're kind of, you know, they just don't need it because they're like essentially lions, is massively problematic as well.
I've not heard that. Is that a thing?
It is, sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very common bit of advice I'm hearing. I think the other issue why I think the XL bullies in particular, and also the cane corsos, end up on these tools is because they're not really bred for obedience training or to have lots of engagement with their caregiver or owner, I'll say at this point. Wouldn't call them necessarily caregivers, all of them. The people particularly I'm talking about is the trainers on social media using aversive tools. But they often, trainers find, oh, they're not listening, they don't just respond to food, or normally because they're too stressed, but also, as I say, they have quite a short threshold in terms of training as well, because they weren't bred for it. Your Mali and your Border Collie and all of those dogs that, your working labs, they're bred to be trained, really, to a certain extent. I mean, they still need autonomy and agency and all the rest of it, but particularly with these American bullies and these kind of cane corsos, they really struggle with too much, being asked for too many behaviors. And I think this is why people then, sort of label them as stubborn and end up having to use these tools. And I get called a lot with kind of untrainable and referred, other trainers will refer dogs to me and things, these untrainable dogs that won't engage. And it's unfortunately a sad story that's happening over and over and over again, is no one's sat and told everyone, hey, are these dogs bred to be, obedience trained? Maybe that's why you have to have an e-collar or get them really high arousal to be able to get them engaged, and glued to a toy. But you shouldn't have to work that hard to get a dog to engage with you. I think that's an issue. I know before we started recording, we were talking about loose lead walking, and it's partly why I really like training these kind of dogs that are labeled high drive but actually aren't bred for obedience training, and getting them to loose lead walk without a prong collar or e-collar or any kind of force, or winding them up with a toy. Because once you actually just bond with them, get them doing some slow sniffing, and put them into a context where they don't feel pressured, they're actually really easy to train. But it has to be a two-way street, as it should be with all training, I suppose.
Training, education. Let me go for education. How do we educate people about bull breed? How do we get that out there so that people totally understand what bull breeds are about? Yeah. Everything you just mentioned about the XL bullies has been, I would say, absolutely spot on, because a lot of people are doing the opposite to what you have said they should be doing. Yeah. I'm yet to see anyone on my list that haven't done any bite sports, bite work, where the dog is overworked, yeah, mainly in obedient stuff. I'm yet to see a dog that has got a rapport with the owner, yeah. And most owners are scared of their dog, yeah. So, I'd like to know, how do we educate these people? Where does that come from?
I think it's really difficult at the moment, because our industry, even on the positive reinforcement side, when it comes to these dogs, is being massively dominated by this rhetoric that these dogs are working breeds and that bull terrier types are working breeds. And I just argue they're not. They were dogs that we used for blood sports, now hundreds of years ago almost. And essentially, that's not working a dog. There's no relationship in putting your dog. I mean, dog men of the day would argue, they had these relationships with their dogs, and they did to a certain extent, because the dogs were bred to be insanely loyal and intuitive to their caregivers. But I wouldn't class bull terriers or your American bullies as a working breed, purely because if we look at it plainly, they're very diluted now, a lot of them. But also, what's working about putting a dog in a pit and making them fight another animal? You could probably do that with a lot of different breeds. So I think that's a massive problem in our industry in general, as I say, even on the positive reinforcement side, is because these dogs are getting labeled as working breeds, and also this rhetoric of them needing to bite is also dominating the positive reinforcement side. So rather than thinking about these dogs probably need free work, lots of slow sniffing, lots of back molar chewing, nice big ostrich bone will do, or daily carrots and things like that. They need a slow pace. They need short training sessions, no more than sort of 3 to 5 minutes a day, I would say. And they need a lot of rest as well. We need to be understanding what pain looks like in dogs, or what it can look like. And also recognizing that actually we can't always rule out pain, and that's obviously more of the veterinary side. But in terms of education, I think first of all, within our side of the fence, people need to understand that these are not gladiators. They are not, I get a lot of, when I post about bull breeds, I get a lot on my private Facebook, not a lot, but I get a few kind of backhanded comments that are meant to be complimentary in the posts, but might say things which give a slight twang of, well, these dogs are dangerous. And it's like, okay, like, of course they are, because they're big and strong, but that's not the point of the conversation here. What we need to be talking about is the fact that these dogs feel pain. These dogs are dogs. And, there's a massive issue with humans causing the problem, and the wrong rhetoric in our industry, which is actually causing dogs to be dangerous. And I will give an example of that shortly. But in terms of education, we at least need to get it right within our side of the industry, which I'm really trying to push towards. And I think also in terms of education, the vet staff need to get up on behaviour. I'm hoping to, it sort of started, but start a proper campaign about kind of recognition of pain in big, strong dogs. Because although pain is hard, a pain diagnosis is quite hard to get from a vet, as we know as behaviourists, it's much easier to get in a poodle, a toy poodle, than it is in a cane corso, or like getting a vet to agree to a pain trial in a toy poodle or a miniature dachshund than it is one of these big strong dogs. And I think the other issue that bull breeds have, like I said, is at least with some other dogs and some other breeds, they will show more hypoarousal, kind of normal painful behaviors, right? Like resting more, or getting achy, getting up, or not wanting to leave the house, or these kind of things. Whereas with bull breeds, you most of the time will see really hyper aroused, grabby behaviors, and a dog that can leap off 6 foot in the air, or is constantly trying to bite things, or won't take the signals from other dogs, and will just play and play and play until it turns into a fight. Surely those dogs can't be in pain, right? They're not usual signs of pain that even we're taught about in clinical behavioral medicine. But in fact, that is what painful bull breeds look like. And I can't diagnose pain because I am not a vet, but the fact is that is what we're seeing in painful bull breeds, and that is not commonly known. And I think what's really important is spreading that information, because at least if that was known, then the other education can come with it, because then people can start deducing, hey, these tools cause pain, so they could cause problem behaviors as well. Lots of other things I think would fall into place. And there's so much wrong with our industry in general. And these dogs have always been failed since their creation, and are still being massively failed. And it's sad to hear this rhetoric that is so damaging, that they need bite sports. Like I said, if you want to do bite sports with whatever breed of dog you have, just make sure they have a healthy musculoskeletal system, right? And you can do it with any dog. I've seen some beautiful couple of examples of people doing lots of tuggy and bite work with staffies, and they've got beautiful relationships with those dogs. But those dogs are very healthy. They're with trainers who understand arousal and things. I would argue how good are those dogs around other dogs though? Do they have those skills? But but saying that, they have beautiful relationships with their caregivers. So it's not about bashing it completely, but it is about understanding these dogs do not need bite work. And I will say that until I'm blue in the face. And in 15 years of rehabbing bull breeds, never have I utilized bite work. And I very rarely use tug. I haven't found it to be a useful tool in rehabilitation of bull breeds or raising the foster puppies or rehabbing severe cases of biting. It's just not something I've used.
Okay, Jessica, it's been absolutely amazing listening to you. Yeah. Just taking it all in and getting my educational fix of Xl bullies and bull breeds. Because we all, if you like, use the word specialise in different breeds. You mentioned the Rothy earlier on. Yes, they had their rap. They certainly did. And came very close to being that XL bully and pit bull.
Mm.
Jessica, it's been a pleasure having you on today. If people want to find you and hire you for work, how can they go about that?
Yeah, you can get in touch on my website, which is has my phone number and my email, and that's littlelargedogs.com. The other place that's good to find me is Instagram. That's the place that I keep most updated, and that's Little Large Dogs LDN.
Wow. Well, folks, this comes to the end of this podcast. So it's a goodbye from myself and Patricia. And we're definitely going to get Jess back to give us some more insight into bull breeds and other topics regarding bull breeds. So until then, it's goodbye from us.